so let's take a quick look at A3. And in A3, I'm asking you to create a calculator. Now, I'm not, and I do not want a calculator like what you would use in a math class where you put like 1 plus 3 equals and it gives you the answer. That's not the kind of calculator I'm talking about. What the kind of calculator I'm talking about is like a currency converter that takes dollars and tells me how much it would be in euros, or takes Fahrenheit and converts it to Celsius. Or if I want to figure out how much would my monthly car payment be, right? I have $1,000 to put down. The car I want is $8,000 and I want to finance it for 24 months. What's my monthly payment? That's a more challenging one, and that's going to require some use of PEMDAS in your head. Some of these are pretty simple. Some of them will be more complicated, but basically you want to find out what the formula is for solving that problem. How does it express in Python? Because if you've got a formula that is kind of like x equals 3 times 1 to the squared, or like y, and then you've got something under it like this, you've got to figure out how does that come out in a linear way, because obviously you can't do those massive vertical or oddly formatted formulas. So sometimes you have to break the formula down into pieces. Sometimes you have to do it in stages. A lot of times you can express it using parentheses to control the order of operations and things like that. But you got to figure that out. That's part of the thinking part of this. Do the calculation, print the result. And of course, we're getting input from the user here. So you'll say, welcome to my currency converter. How many dollars do you have? They enter the amount of dollars they have. And then it spits out, here's how many euros I'll give you for your $100 or whatever. So I'm going to do a quick and easy example of this. And for mine, I'm going to use a calculator that will allow a user to calculate the area of a rectangle. So nobody's allowed to use that one. You can use other shapes if you want. By the way, on this assignment, I'd really love it if you would be working with 2 inputs from the user. I know some of those, like the currency converter or the temperature converter, those are only 1 input, but I think it's more valuable if you're working with 2. I will give you credit for 1. So the other thing we're going to start working on in this is how we're interacting with the user. So we want to think about that, the user experience, and make sure that we're doing some things. So the first thing we're going to work on doing is welcoming the user and telling them what it is we're doing. So welcome to my rectangle area calculator. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to also make it a little bit more decorative. Now, here's an interesting thing you can do with a string. And I think I showed you this already, but in case I haven't, I'm going to put an asterisk in a string. And I'm going to show you how to make a line of 60 asterisks really easy. Now, I could sit here and go 1, 2, 3, 4. I could hit it 60 times. But there's a much easier way to do this. And if I say asterisk, actually I'm going to use number signs in here. Number asterisk 60. So basically what I'm saying is do this times 60. That's really the only time you can do math with a string, is I want to do that 60 times. So if I do that, copy, paste, and I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to take this string and I'm going to center it on a line of 60. And all I have to do that is that. So it's a string method called center. And if I add that to the string, what it says is take that, however many characters this is. You're going to count how many characters it is. You're going to subtract that number from 60, divide that by 2, and you put that number of spaces on both sides. So this is exactly centered in a line of 60. So when I run this, I get that, which is not a super amazing user interface, but it's better than a punch in the face, right? It's not that terrible. And then I'm going to print a couple of new lines at the bottom. Print on its own will give me one new line, and so if I print that character, it goes down to a couple of spaces. So now I'm going to say, and I'm gonna create these as floats. So FL height equals input. How high is your rectangle? Sounds like it's doing some drugs. How high is your rectangle? So how high is your rectangle? And in order for this to not be a string, which is what the user is going to input, I'm going to wrap that in the float conversion function. I'm just going to put it all in one line. I could use self-assignment, or I could do it on another line of code, but it's much cleaner and easier to do it this way. Now, this is inherently risky, and as we get into creating apps that people will actually use, you don't want to do this. Because can you trust a user to enter something correctly? The answer is no, never. Never, never, never. But we're basically the user here, and we haven't really learned how to take care of this so that a user has to enter a number. Oh, you will. But right now we're just going to say, let's just trust the user. That's just a terrible idea out in the real world. Width equals, and oops, float, and then input, there we go. Typing is tough today. How wide is your rectangle? Okay. Now, I'm not putting strip at the end of this input. If I wanted to leave it a string, I would, but since I'm changing it to a float, if they put a space before or after it, it just goes away when you convert it to a numeric type. Spaces are just gone, ignored. So we've got that, and now I need to do the math. So let's put in some comments here, right? I'm welcoming the user. Here I'm getting the input. Now you can do more comments than this. I'm just kind of showing you what I think is sufficient. Basically, you want to put in enough comments that if you didn't look at this code for 2 months and you came back and looked at it again, you would immediately know what they meant. That's sort of the level that I'm looking for. So next, do the calculation. And to calculate the area of a square, I'm going to get FL area. Now it's a float because I'm multiplying a float times a float. A float times anything, any other number, doesn't matter what it is always going to be a float. The only way you get an int is if you do an int times an int. And even then, don't take it for granted because you get some weird rounding errors with certain numbers. So you always want to be aware of what data type you've got. So I'm going to go FL width times FL height. And that gives me the area. And now I want to say print the results. So we are going to say print, and I'm going to make this an F string so I can inject the variables here. I'd say the area of A. Oh, that's all in there. That's not what I want. I was like, why is that getting underlined? There we go. The area of A, FL height by FL width rectangle is FL area. Right? So all I've done here is I welcomed the user, got their input on the two variables, making sure that I convert them to a numeric type. In some cases, you could use an int. You just need to know what you're doing. Then I do the calculation, and then I print the results in a sort of friendly way here. And so let's test out the code and see how it goes. So how high is your rectangle? 10 by 20. So the area of a 10 by 20 rectangle is 200. Ta-da, the math checks out. And that is assignment 3, done right before your very eyes. Now, you can't copy this exactly. I don't want to see any rectangle area calculators in there, but I'm sure you can think of something that's interesting to calculate. Now, obviously, the more variables you're getting from the user, the more complicated the formula is, the more of a challenge this will be. So I would recommend that you challenge yourself. Of course, I cannot force you to challenge yourself. That's up to you. But that's the assignment. Any questions before we get going on work time?